Strain takes 1,000 different forms. A pet falls ill, a project falls flat, things fall apart. The future defocuses into a million possible pathways, none of them, suddenly, all that appealing. And underscoring it all, the ceaseless drumbeat of alerts, alarms, and appeals for our attention. Bubbles of bother carried on a cacophony of clangs.
Welcome. You've got mail. Goodbye.
To some, that optical onslaught of supersaturated stimuli is the ultimate strain. Our screens, in other words, with all of their overdriven colors and flickers too fast to notice, are the problem. It's a familiar argument, advanced by everyone from the makers of the light phone to the custodians of Getaway, whose network of remote tiny homes was once marketed under the tagline, "There's no Wi-Fi, and there never will be." But we still need computers. We just need them to be calmer. So goes the pitch from a new company called Daylight, whose DC1 promises a new kind of computer designed for deep focus and well-being. To tech geeks, it might come off as a shameless cash grab. To ashwagandha eating Earth biscuits, the perfect way to fight screen addiction. To me, it's an opportunity to spend an intentional afternoon away from my other screens on Governor's Island. No press junket, no sponsored travel, just a 3-minute boat ride from my South Brooklyn apartment with 2 pre-production samples and 1 question on my mind. Does this so-called Kindle on crack really change the way I compute? For such an aspirational product, the DC1 is easy to explain. It's an ordinary tablet with an extraordinary display. There's nothing special about the underlying Android 13 platform or the mid-tier MediaTek Silicon powering it, and for those in search of shortfalls, there are plenty. There's no GPS here, and no 4G or 5G to go with the Wi-Fi. The tablet is fairly thick at 9.6 millimeters, it sits heavy on a pinky at 1.2 pounds, and it's got a set of bezels that, well, I think John Moriello says it best.
These giant bezels, it feels kind of like an iPad from like 2010, but actually having a resting place for your thumb and where it's not touching the display is incredibly comfortable and really important.
He's the guy who designed the DC1 hardware, and his video discussing the decisions that went into that process offers rare insight into what it's like to build a first-generation product. Seriously, anyone interested in industrial design should watch it. Speaking of someone deeply involved in the launch of his own first-generation product, drink for clicks reference, it's striking how many challenges are involved that I never would have recognized before. In the case of the DC1, making the bezels symmetrical would have added something like $100 to the per-unit cost of what's already a very expensive device. At $729, 3 out of the 4 iPads Apple offers cost less, and an Android tablet with comparable specs can be found on Amazon for under $200. The high price is a combination of simple market realities. When you're only making small quantities of something, the per-unit cost is typically higher, and the DC1's only truly unique attribute, its 10.5-inch display. No, it's not e-ink, nor any form of e-paper, nor is it simply an off-the-shelf component. It's a custom reflective LCD patented by Daylight. The result is a grayscale screen that looks an awful lot like the e-ink of Kindle, but with the smooth refresh rate of a standard tablet or smartphone. Now, why would you want such a thing? Well, a few reasons. Daylight spills a lot of ink describing how the DC1 doesn't subject its users to blue light, the digital boogeyman that for years has been accused of suppressing melatonin and therefore compromising our circadian rhythms, making it harder to sleep, and making it easier to market things like gamer glasses that certain people once wore in their YouTube videos for some reason. But the science underpinning those claims has recently been shown to be, shaky. And to be frank, the kind of granola bohemianism the blue light discourse begets is not the most convincing part of the DC1's pitch. What I do find compelling is the opportunity this display provides to work, or read, or sketch, or do any of the computing you're used to doing outdoors in broad daylight. Which, sure, you can already read on a Kindle, but scrolling and zooming is janky. Or you can crank up the backlight on your tablet or laptop, but you're still fighting glossy display glass, and the battery dies in a few hours. With usage like mine, the 8,000 mAh power supply tucked inside the DC1 has been big enough to keep it going for 5 days. That's even with substantial use indoors, with the dual-tone white and amber backlight available after dark. Back in the light, the Wacom stylus scritches across the paper-like etched finish with pleasant friction and no latency that I could detect. And while you can enable standard notifications on the DC1, by default, the device ships with them disabled. And until Daylight builds its own custom top layer for Android, it will also run Niagara Launcher for the minimalist, distraction-free experience the company promises. Speaking of promises, Daylight makes a lot of them. The pogo pens around back are intended for the keyboard accessory coming later. As of now, you need to use a Bluetooth keyboard. Not my favorite solution, thanks to connectivity issues and the requirement to carry and charge another separate accessory. The DC1's extra side buttons are intended to serve as page turn keys and will eventually be user customizable if you want them to do something else. But right now, they just function as a back button or a shortcut to the bug reporting feature. As for fit and finish, it's not there yet on either of my pre-production samples, with inconsistent gaps between the cover glass and soft touch plastic casing. Even the custom cases are unfinished, their comfortable grandma sweater and Naugahyde-like textures lacking the keycaps for power and volume that would allow you to actually press those buttons with the case on. All of it, says Daylight, is coming soon, along with an unlockable bootloader for the roll-your-own crowd. Well, you know what I'm gonna say to that. Even though this isn't a review per se, as I don't have the final hardware or software, I've got to react to what I have in my hands, not promises of things to come. That's a lesson Rabbit, and to a lesser extent Humane, learned the hard way earlier this year. And while I would stop short of accusing either of them of fraud, those product launches have supercharged my skepticism this season. To such a degree that when I first saw the DC1 announced, I would have bet money that it was a cynical cash grab by a fly-by-night con artist. So after my sojourn with the DC1 on Governor's Island, I met up with the man behind the company for a walk and talk through my Brooklyn neighborhood. Anjan Katta has been working on the idea behind Daylight since 2018, and in some ways he's exactly what you'd expect from the Stanford graduate who spent 2 years backpacking places like Kilimanjaro. VentureBeat described his unveiling of the DC1 as a, quote, heartfelt but bewildering speech that could have easily been mistaken for a guided meditation or therapy session, unquote. And yeah, he's prone to wild deviations and falling down rabbit holes as he describes everything from electro-wedding and active matrix LCDs to the nature of wisdom, Eastern philosophy, and seasonal affective disorder. My couple hours with him, both in person and virtual, are some of the densest I've spent just communicating with another person. And while I don't share his obsession with display technologies and freeing us from our digital shackles, I don't doubt the sincerity of his beliefs or the passion with which he expresses them. While he's appeared on a lot of Bitcoin-heavy podcasts talking in the vernacular of a lot of Silicon Valley tech bros, if you actually listen to what he's saying, it's clear that he has nothing but disdain for said stereotypical bros, because they're only interested in appearing as though they want to help people. Now, could it be an act? Absolutely. But I've met a lot of people on my time on this rock, and if he is snowing me, he's a truly gifted charlatan. Still, the market is replete with alternatives to Daylight. While e-paper will never refresh nearly as quickly as an LCD, it is bistable, meaning it needs almost no power to keep an image on the screen. And that means you can get the same or better battery life in a slimmer package with a Kindle or Onyx Books tablet. And if color is what you're after, TCL's Next Paper is pretty cool. It uses etched glass and special backlighting to lend a matte finish, paper-like appearance to a color LCD. I've seen this a lot at trade shows over the years, but the company was kind enough to send over a sample of its Tab 10 Next Paper 5G, which, as the name implies, includes integrated access to Verizon's 5G cellular network, powered by Android 14, with cameras and all the fixins in a slimmer and lighter package for only $240. Ultimately, of course, it's also just another Android tablet. Not something you can use outdoors without maxing out its backlight, and not something whose mission is to minimize your distraction and eye strain. If that's what's important to you, Daylight is the company taking it the most seriously. And it's made a compelling enough case that it's already sold over 4,000 units, with deliveries said to be beginning in July for first batch customers. Is the DC1 something I'd carry? No. I already have too much in my bag to begin with, and the notion of carrying not just the tablet, but also the associated keyboard and stand you need to make it the computer its branding suggests just makes it too cumbersome for my needs. Now, a Daylight phone might be another story. The recent announcement of the Light Phone 3, alongside the daily crushing weight of my 14 relentlessly chirping inboxes, makes me yearn for a minimalist phone more so than a tablet. Or maybe, in the end, it'll turn out that, with the exception of folks who suffer from specific types of eye strain, all we really needed to do was switch our smartphones to monochrome, turn off our alerts when we needed to, and suppress the impulse to spend more on the single-use gadgets we buy to solve problems that no amount of money could. After all, in a world where even some getaways have Wi-Fi these days, we can't always expect deprivation or artificial limitation to protect us from the strain of existing in 2024. While you're in the offbeat section of Weird Tech YouTube, check out my recent reviews of the Humane AI Pen and a trip back in time to the glory days of a phone maker you probably never heard about. This video was produced following 1 week with 2 DC1 review samples provided by Daylight, but the company provided no compensation in exchange for this coverage, and I never offer manufacturers copy approval, early previews, or editorial input of any kind into my reviews. If you'd like to see more videos like that, please subscribe to The Mr. Mobile on YouTube. Until next time, from Michael Fisher, Captain Two Phones on Threads, thanks for watching. And stay mobile, my friends.